Thing takes.
This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And thank you for joining me here this evening on Libertarian Counterpoint. With me today is Mr. Richard Fields. Richard, thanks for being with us. You've had some nice long journeys this last couple months, so it's nice to see you back in familiar territory.
I'll just say this: it's good to be back home.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Maybe that's the best benefit of traveling is when you get to come back home, right? I think.
That's my take on it. I mean, I enjoy travel, but I limit myself to, or I should limit myself to a few weeks a year, and then just stay home the rest of the time. Better for my mental health.
Yeah, some of those border crossings can be complicated, right?
Oh yeah.
Even here these days, border crossings are complicated. So
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to move on to our first topic here. This big, beautiful bill that has gotten past the House and now it's moved on to the Senate, where it's facing a little bit of pushback from some deficit. We're not going to call them hawks. People are complaining about the deficit. There's only two real deficit hawks in Congress these days. So
you're talking about Massey and Paul, I assume.
Yeah.
And I mean, Thomas Massey is the only guy that I think the only Republican that voted against the Trump bill, and of course the bill is an absolute it's nonsense, because what it does is it increases the deficit, and we already have a deficit that is well over 37 billion, and that doesn't count the off-balance sheet obligations like Medicare and Social Security, things that people care about a little bit, which probably another $100 trillion. So we're talking about an unpayable deficit already, and Trump is piling on with this big, beautiful, ugly piece of junk that he is able to muscle through Congress, because the Republicans, just like the Democrats, figure that they can push it on down the road forever. Well, they're not going to be able to do that. The day of reckoning is coming, and the first inkling that we have of that is the bond market. The bond market is now 10-year bond and 30-year bonds are poking their way above 5%, which is kind of unprecedented. When the stock market is going down, bonds are supposed to be going up. Well, they're both going down at the same time, and we've got a problem, Houston, and everybody knows it. Well, obviously not everybody knows it. Everybody with able to do basic arithmetic knows it, but there's a whole lot of people in Congress that either don't know how to do basic arithmetic or don't care, and Trump doesn't care.
Yeah, we've been pointing out for a long time that our deficit and debt spending was, unsustainable. That at some point, the debt's going to come calling, and who's ever happened to be sitting in the office or in power when that happens is going to take the blame for it, when the reality is the whole system is to blame, right?
I mean, the last bond auction was problematical. They had the federal government had a hard time selling AAA, well, now AA rated bonds. Moody's just downgraded the U.S. sovereign debt rating following Standard & Poor's and Fitch. So now nobody is rating us a AAA. There's only a couple of companies in the world that are AAA, Berkshire Hathaway and Johnson & Johnson, if I remember right. But they're now better rated. Private companies are better rated than the U.S. government. That's not the way it's supposed to work, but that's what's happening.
Well, of course, the real scandal with that, Richard, is how in the heck has it taken so long for them to downgrade the credit rating of the United States?
Well, there's this little problem that they have with regulation, which is the government comes along and says, "Hey, that's a nice rating service you have there. You sure don't want to lose it, do you?" Lose it to regulation. Yeah. That's the issue.
Yeah, that's kind of always the underlying threat, right? Whether it's implicit or explicit. Yeah. That's the threat. Okay, so talking about more threats, Gavin Newsom has called an end to homeless encampments, which is really strange considering it's, he kind of was the leader of the charge of the homeless policy that created the mess that we're in now.
Yeah, and his solution is just to throw more money at the problem to increase the number of homeless shelters that nobody wants to go to, including the homeless, because they're dangerous in many cases. He's throwing more money at the problem. That's not going to solve it. The problem is the fact that housing is massively uh, expensive in California compared to incomes. That's all 100% at the doorsteps of California and to a certain extent federal government. I mean, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get a building permit for an ordinary home, and that's before you start, digging the foundation. That's a problem. The other problem is NIMBYs saying you can't build here, you can't build there, nothing in my backyard. So you have a problem finding a place to build in the first place. And then you've got the zoning restrictions that say, no, you can't build tiny homes, you can't build this, you can't build that. So get rid of the government regulation and get rid of the overhead to the building industry caused by government, and building could blossom. Building new homes could skyrocket. That would solve the housing problem. When you're looking at what is it, $2,400 rent to on average to live in California, and you're trying to do that on a minimum wage or less, you can't do it, and that's why you have a homeless problem. Get rid of the regulation, the homeless issue will go away very, very shortly.
Yeah, that's it's one of those self-inflicted wounds here in California that over the last 30, 40 years at this point, we've kind of had this, if we don't build it, they won't come. While they're having open arms for people to come, at some point that those two factors are going to collide, right? At some point, you're going to have not enough housing for too many people, and the cost, anybody who knows anything about supply and demand knows what happens when those two things happen.
Yeah, and it's happening in California, and Newsom wants to apply a Band-Aid and enforcement, strict enforcement against homeless encampments by cities and towns. It's the cities and towns and counties that are going to take the blame, not Newsom. He's just trying to stay ahead of an issue that's going to dog him in any presidential campaign he wants to run. He's going to say, "Well, not my fault. It's the cities and counties. They're the ones that are, allowing this to happen." It's just a CYA effort on the part of Newsom. It's not going to work, and it's really kind of shameful on his part.
Yeah, is he really trying to angle himself for a presidential run, trying to kind of moderate his positions?
Oh, yeah.
Does he think he's going to fool people?
That's been obvious for the last couple of years that he's trying to position himself to run for president. He's got the ambition. And right now, the Democratic Party is essentially leaderless. Nobody is being seriously considered as actual somebody who can actually win in the next presidential election by the Democrats. Somebody will materialize eventually. My guess is it probably won't be Newsom, but he has his hopes, and you never know. I famously said that Gray Davis couldn't be governor, and of course he did.
Well, yeah, but he's also the only one to ever get booted, right?
True enough.
So you're at least correct that he shouldn't have been governor.
Yeah.
There, Richard. All right, Richard, you've got a From the Fields this week. Do you want to play the recording, or were we going to read it?
Go ahead and play the recording. I've got a crick in my throat, and I probably won't get through it without coughing. So go ahead and play it.
Sounds like a good deal. All right, here we go.
Hi, this is Richard Fields with this week's Report from the Fields. There are three primary ways to get what you want in this world: luck, politics, and work. Luck, by definition, is something we have no control over. That leaves politics and work. Politics can mean anything from brown-nosing the boss to denigrating your coworkers behind their backs to using government to get something for nothing. Brown-nosers and gossips usually end up as losers in the long run. But working the political system to benefit from the efforts of others has been going on forever and will probably never end. Politics is a win-lose game. In general, working taxpayers get stiffed, and whoever gets something from the government wins at the taxpayer's expense. Win-lose. Corporate welfare, or as it's politely called, industrial policy, is a big winner. Think the portion of the healthcare industry that's funded by government, a big chunk of the defense industry, and the education business. ordinary welfare recipients, government workers who don't actually produce anything anyone wants, and regulators who just get in the way of commerce. You get the picture. Not really an honorable way to live. That leaves working for a living, producing goods and services that people actually want to buy voluntarily, the win-win part of the economy. The private sector in macroeconomic terms. Generally speaking, the larger the portion of the economy controlled by politics, the poorer people are in general. Think the USSR, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and other countries throughout history where almost everything is controlled by the government, that is, politically. Compare that to the United States and Western Europe, where until the 1970s or so, governments were relatively small and the private sector was much larger in comparison. Incomes increased for rich and poor alike. Scientific discovery boomed. The trajectory of history favors win-win, an economy based on freely trading with each other rather than stealing from each other. An illustrative story demonstrating that sweep of progress is the story of the supersonic transport, the SST. The first SST that carried passengers was the Concorde. It was a joint venture between a French and English company and started carrying passengers for Air France and British Airways in 1976. It flew at 1,354 miles per hour and crossed the Atlantic in 3.5 hours. Unfortunately, politics got in the way. Overland flights in the United States were banned because they caused sonic booms. Fair enough, but the heavy hand of politics banned flights at supersonic speed, not the booms themselves. Nevertheless, research on supersonic aviation was stymied for almost 50 years. But the human desire to have breakfast in New York and arrive in Paris in time for lunch never went away. Several private sector startup companies are working on reviving SSTs. The largest and best known is Boom Supersonic. Boom's Overture would fly at subsonic speeds over land and use sustainable aviation fuels to achieve net zero carbon emissions. It already has pre-orders from United, American, and Japan Airlines. Another more speculative contender is Astromechanica. Astro is designing an engine that would have 3 different modes of operation: a fuel-sipping turbofan for takeoff and landing, a ramjet for supersonic, and get this, a rocket to go hypersonic, 5 times the speed of sound. It would burn liquid natural gas instead of kerosene, reducing the cost of fuel by a factor of 10. Astro's developers think they can make it all happen with ticket prices comparable to Southwest. Leave Los Angeles at 10 in the morning and get to New York at 9 a.m. Time travel. I'm on board. You see, people acting voluntarily in the win-win economy will always prevail in the long run because they provide things people actually want. Politicians can slow people down by more than 50 years in the case of supersonic travel, but they cannot stop the trajectory of history. I'm Richard Fields, and that's this week's Report from the Fields. See you again next week.
Well, thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
It's always insightful. It's always insightful. It's not a strange fact that California leads the country in poverty, in the real poverty rate. It's while you look at how controlled everything here is in California by the government at some level or another. It is what it is, but it's not a surprise, now is it?
No, not really.
Not really, no. Okay, so let's move on, Richard. Letitia James has kind of made a bed that and now she's having to lie in it, I suspect is a way to describe that. She started this lawfare business where she used shall we say novel legal theories to prosecute Donald Trump, and well, now those same theories are being turned onto her. Is anybody surprised but her?
Well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, I guess is the polite way of putting it. The underlying problem is that we have way too many laws. There was a guy that a Harvard professor actually that came up with the idea that everybody is guilty of, on average, 3 felonies a day, and the reason for that is because there are way too many federal, not to mention state and local laws. And you know, as the head of I guess intelligence or something, head of the KGB in Stalinist Russia said, "You show me the man, I'll show you the crime." We've come to that place. We've come to a place where nobody can go through life without being guilty of something. Just the other day, Public, the organization that has been putting out information on what the Biden administration was doing that was in violation of free speech, among other things, and came up with the idea, released, actually was Tulsi Gabbard released some information that said that people who spread information about COVID being the COVID lockdowns not being a good idea, and spread information about the vaccines being questionable, were domestic terrorists. They actually labeled you and I, or at least me, a domestic terrorist. And that, I didn't know it at the time. I'm sure you didn't know it at the time. And what that does is it makes it possible for the NSA and the other 17 intelligence agencies to spy on us illegally. Well, you think it was illegally, but they've made it legal. And they've made it possible for the government to find something wrong with the business dealings of everybody. Now, Trump was a big target, and Letitia James is a big target. But that doesn't solve the problem of there being way too many things out there that can run you afoul of the law.
Yeah, if they want to get you, they can, right? It's just a matter of knowing which laws they feel like applying at the time. I'm actually surprised they couldn't find a real law for that Trump violated. Was always my surprise. Because you can't find a real one. There's so many laws, so many things. You can't actually find a real one. And they tried to get him for that
right
goofy.
Now, you think the emolument clause would apply with him accepting for free a 747? I mean, come on.
Yeah, well, you know, those things happen all the time. At this stage, it's pretty hard to get upset over these things because it's such a common practice, right?
Yeah, I guess.
And so many of these people only get upset when the other guy does it. When their guy does it, oh no, it's different for us somehow. Yeah, the details are different, but the underlying issue is the same. And
well, it boils down to the more the laws, the more the corruption, the more obvious it is as a political matter to just prosecute your opponents. Don't beat them at the polls, prosecute them. We see this in Brazil constantly. Brazil has a very corrupt government. The reason is they, like us, have way too many laws, making it way too easy to go after your political opponents in the court of law rather than in the political realm.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to education here for a second, Richard. A popular college major, it has one of the highest unemployment rates, and it's computer science. And this thing doesn't surprise me. By the time the education industry gets into behind what am I thinking of? Behind a major, behind this type of thing. The last time I saw it was networking, right? The education system got just into networking just at the time where networking was handled by automation.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of trained network engineers out into the world that didn't need them anymore. And we're happening.
You mean that the problem of unemployment can't be solved by learning to code anymore?
No. That was always the problem, wasn't it? If you teach everybody to code, then everybody's you're competing with everybody. And so the value of your particular skills become less.
Anymore, my understanding is that AI can do pretty much anything that a computer coder can do.
Well, no, you still need the computer coder to check AI because AI writes some screwy stuff.
Okay.
But the point is only the good coders are going to have jobs. Only the people who can go through AI code and debug AI code quickly are going to be the ones who are going to have the jobs in the future. Those are the guys who are going to be paid $300,000 a year. There's not going to be that whole vast middle ground is going to be gone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole problem with education is not market driven. in a market-driven situation, you would not have education rising in price at something, I don't know, 2 or 3 times the overall inflation rate. And that's what's happening in college education. That's what's happening in high education. The price of education is going up dramatically faster than the cost of everything else, that along with healthcare. And the reason for it is because they are quasi-monopolies, whether it's subsidized higher education or the actual monopolies or near monopolies of elementary and high school education.
Yeah, there's no competition. There's no desire to have to move quickly. Everything gets to, evolve far slower than the real world does. I mean, we're teaching everybody to code, but what we actually need is plumbers and electricians, right? But
Yeah.
the system doesn't want to teach that.
Yeah, and the whole idea of Trump's tariffs is going to make that even worse. Trump's tariffs are going to protect established companies who will therefore be able to charge a higher price because they only have to match the tariff price of their overseas competitors, and so they'll stagnate and bloviate with unneeded employees and overhead expenses. We're whenever you have industrial policy or whenever you have a policy that creates government protected monopolies, and let's face it, all monopolies are one way or another created by government. Whenever you have monopolies, competition suffers and quality suffers.
Yeah. All right. So talk about quality suffering, or hopefully not. Broken clock was right here. Trump signed an order to overhaul the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, hopefully to speed up reactor development. And a lot of this was for small reactors on federal land. I think that was the big push, but they are looking at speeding up some of the larger reactors, commissioning and building some new large nuclear reactors. And this is something people like you and me, Richard, have been arguing for a long time.
Yeah, for a couple of decades. There's no reason at all why nuclear, which is the least polluting source of energy, there's less pollution from nuclear than there is from solar, from wind, and obviously from fossil fuels. There's no reason at all. And it's got the best safety record of all kinds of power, all power generation sources. I mean, every one of them, 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl aside, are included, it's still overall more safe than any other kind of power generation. So it's absolutely insane that we have been holding back nuclear with regulations for what, 50 years now. That will change eventually, and I have to give the Trump administration kudos for their deregulatory efforts, at least in this area. It's a good idea.
Yeah,
especially the small SMRs, small modular reactors. Those are reactors that can be made essentially in a factory and shipped to your town to power the town.
Yeah, those are the very type of technology we have been needing to implement for a really, really long time, because you can stabilize the grid that way. We've seen in Spain where they had issues where so much the way that power is generated from renewables isn't as stable as power generated with big old turbines, simply because of the momentum of turbines. And so, having this backbone, this stable backbone power, is more important than we ever realized, even those of us who've been rooting for nuclear for a long time.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was a very good demonstration in the Iberian Peninsula. You have to have the momentum created by turbines in order to have a fail-safe power supply. And power went out in 5 seconds or something like that, when I guess the clouds overcame the sun or the wind stopped blowing. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but there wasn't enough power to keep things going. And the reason is because there was no momentum to keep it going through a blip in sunlight.
Yeah, it's the strange, we forget electricity also survives on harmonics, and you disrupt that and you disrupt the whole system. All right, so we talked about regulatory concerns here a minute ago, so we're going to bring up the next set of regulatory concerns. Is California's trying to build this new reservoir, but it's been taking decades, Richard, literally decades. And so now the commission responsible for it is threatening to stop spending money, since California is going to hold a commission accountable for I'm so confused on these things on so many levels, Richard. It's baffling to me.
Well, I mean, California, at the behest of the Greens, has been tearing down reservoirs in the Sierra over the last 20 or 30 years. And hydro is also a very clean source of energy. And they're tearing down reservoirs because they're worried about smelt or salmon. And I like salmon as well as the next guy, smelt not so much. But the fact is that there's a reservoir that has been proposed for Northern California, north of south of Redding. That would be a very good location. That's been held up in regulation. This one in San Jose or outside of San Jose has been held up by regulatory authorities. I mean, with CEQA and other legal court suits, you can hold up pretty much any kind of development by lawsuits pretty much forever, and that's what's been going on.
Yeah, and that's kind of it's almost deliberate.
Oh, yeah,
in a
it's
sense,
absolutely
because
deliberate.
how much of this, the bureaucracy gets paid a lot of money to do nothing, and essentially they get to shuffle a bunch of paper around, and the bureaucracy gets to pay itself.
Well, yeah, and you have to understand that a lot of these green organizations are staffed by people who are anti-progress. They're essentially anti-human race. They think there are too many humans, and that the human race should be, the world should be depopulated down to their idea of the carrying capacity of the Earth, which is a fraction of what it's already carrying. And the way of doing that is to stop progress on energy generation, because without energy, we do have problems. And that's kind of the modus operandi a lot of these very radical green nonprofits and so forth.
Yeah, we got about 30 seconds left, Richard. I want to bring up this last story here about the consequences of closing down off-road access in other areas have led to this, where this one town is now overrun with off-road vehicles. But the problem is I happen to know this, that they've been closing off access. So they only have so many places to go. So of course, these places that are left are going to get overrun. It's the only thing that can actually happen. So in a sense, these environmental regulations have led to a condition where the few places that are left are going to get abused, which means they're going to be able to come in and say, for environmental reasons, we're going to have to close them. I mean, it seems to me that's the plan.
That's again trying to shut down the RV and the off-road vehicle industry.
Yeah. All right, Richard, thank you for joining me this week. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We are out of here. Have a good night, and please remember to love everybody.
This is Gail Morgan thanking you for watching the Libertarian Counterpoint each Thursday at 8 p.m. Channel 17 on Comcast, on YouTube, and on Facebook. We invite you to come again next week for the Libertarian Counterpoint.